Let me start with a question every gardener has asked themselves at one point. How did people keep their soils fertile long before plastic bags of fertilizer and store-bought compost bins came along? The answer, my friends, is that they leaned on the quiet power of leaves. Leaves have always been nature's original soil builders, and long before anyone wrote a gardening manual, farmers and villagers noticed something simple. Where leaves fell thick on the forest floor, the ground stayed dark, moist, and alive year after year without anyone turning a compost pile. Today, that ancient observation is still one of the most powerful soil tricks we can use, especially if bending and shoveling aren't as easy as they used to be. Stay with me for the next few minutes and I'll show you exactly how to take this old-world method and use it in your garden to build rich humus without ever touching a compost heap. And before we dig deeper, don't forget to subscribe right here to Soil and Plant Doctor because we share these practical soil secrets that make your gardening easier and more rewarding season after season. Why leaves create humus better than almost anything else? To understand why leaves are so effective, you have to think of a forest. Nobody rakes, nobody fertilizes, and yet the soil beneath a mature woodland is some of the richest, darkest earth you'll ever dig your hands into. The reason is simple. Leaves fall in layers, decompose slowly, and feed an army of fungi, microbes, and worms. Unlike kitchen scraps or grass clippings, leaves break down into stable organic matter called humus. Humus is the dark, sponge-like material that gives soil its rich structure, holding water like a reservoir while releasing nutrients gently over time. What's remarkable is that this process doesn't require the turning, aerating, or balancing of greens and browns that traditional composting demands. Leaves, given time, naturally balance themselves. They are the long game of soil fertility. The ancient leaf trick is about using them directly in the soil rather than waiting on a pile. The method that gardeners of old discovered was astonishingly simple. Instead of piling leaves up separately and waiting a year or more for them to break down, they used them right in place. Freshly fallen leaves were spread over gardens tucked into planting trenches or layered beneath mulch. Over months, and especially through winter and spring rains, those leaves softened, decayed, and merged directly into the soil profile. What they left behind was humus formed right where the roots needed it. No wheelbarrows of finished compost required. Here's one example you can try this season. Just rake up a wheelbarrow of autumn leaves and, if you can, chop them lightly with a mower or shredder. Then, spread about a 5 to 10 centimeter layer directly over an empty garden bed at the end of the growing season. Give the bed a light watering so the leaves settle and then, well, just let them be. By spring, worms will have dragged them into the soil and the top layer will have darkened. Plant directly into this bed, and you'll notice immediately that the ground is softer and easier to work than it was before. That's the ancient trick in its purest form. Mixing leaves into the soil accelerates humus building even further. Some gardeners prefer not to wait for surface mulching to take effect. A variation of the old technique involves digging a shallow trench, about 15 to 20 centimeters deep, filling it halfway with shredded leaves and then covering it with soil. This is especially effective in clay soil, where leaves help create channels for air and water. The ratio here is simple. Fill half the trench with leaves and half with soil. Over weeks, soil microbes and moisture will break down the leaves, and by the time roots grow down, they'll meet a layer rich in humus instead of lifeless clay. If you want a quicker turnaround, lightly sprinkle a handful of nitrogen-rich material, like grass clippings, a little manure, or even diluted urine, over the leaves before burying them. Alright, so this balances the high carbon content of leaves with the nitrogen microbes need to work faster. It's a pretty neat trick, don't you think? And, the result is humus forming in place within a single season without any turning or managing of a pile. That's quite the efficient process. Not all leaves are equal, but all can be used wisely. One of the lessons passed down from older gardeners is that different leaves break down at different speeds. Soft leaves, like those from fruit trees, maples, and beans, well, they decay quickly, sometimes within just a few months. It's fascinating how nature works, isn't it? Tougher leaves like oak or magnolia take longer because of their waxy coating. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use them, though. For tougher leaves, shredding helps speed things up, or you can use them as a slower mulch on pathways where they'll break down over 2 or 3 years. The key is balance. A mix of soft and tough leaves ensures you get both quick humus for immediate fertility and long-lasting organic matter that improves soil structure over the long haul. Leaves don't become humus by themselves, they're really just the raw material, but the real work is done by worms and fungi. When you spread or bury leaves, fungal threads colonize them quickly, weaving through the veins and breaking down lignin, which is that tough material in the cell walls. Worms follow, feeding on the softened leaf tissue and leaving behind castings that are already stable humus. This natural teamwork explains why leaf-based humus is so enduring. Unlike fresh compost that may burn out quickly, humus formed from leaves resists decay, locking carbon into the soil and, creating long-term fertility. This is why, when you peel back a leaf mulch in the spring, you'll often find those white fungal threads and clusters of worms. It's fascinating to see nature at work. That's the soil food web at work, folks. And it's the living proof that you're building something far more valuable than just fertilizer. It's like a bustling city beneath our feet. Now let's talk about those long-term benefits that make this method absolutely unbeatable. The more years you apply the leaf trick, the better your soil becomes. With regular leaf layering or trenching, your soil develops this deep, dark top layer rich in humus. And guess what? It can withstand droughts and heavy rains alike. Amazing, right? Roots find their way more easily, beneficial microbes thrive, and weeds are suppressed because the soil surface remains covered and protected. In fact, many traditional gardens maintained fertility for generations using nothing but the annual fall of leaves and crop residues. Modern studies confirm what ancient gardeners already knew. Humus created this way is more stable and more beneficial than most forms of quick compost. One of the most powerful examples comes from farmers who still practice leaf mulching in parts of Asia and Africa. Instead of relying on fertilizer, they let leaf litter build up year after year. Their soils remain productive without exhausting fertility. You can do the same thing in your backyard beds, raised containers, or even orchard rows. So, how do you actually integrate the leaf trick into your gardening routine? For practical use, just think in terms of timing and layering. In autumn, collect leaves in large bags or bins, making sure they're dry before storing to prevent rot. Through winter and early spring, apply them as needed in garden beds. Use shredded leaves as mulch around vegetables at a depth of about 5 centimeters. For fruit trees, spread them in a wider circle, about 10 centimeters deep, keeping them a hand's width away from the trunk to avoid excess moisture against the bark. If you're refreshing a tired raised bed, just dig in 2 buckets of shredded leaves per square meter of soil, mixing them into the top 15 centimeters, and then water lightly afterward. By the next planting cycle, the bed will be looser, darker, and honestly just teeming with earthworms. Repeat this simple addition once or twice a year, and your soil will transform without ever needing to maintain a compost heap. A reflection on why old methods still matter. What strikes me most about this ancient trick is how it connects us back to the rhythm of nature. Leaves fall every year whether we gather them or not. By learning to use them directly, we step into the same pattern forests have followed for thousands of years. There's wisdom in that simplicity. For older gardeners especially, this method is gentle on the body. No turning piles, no hauling bags of fertilizer, just laying down leaves and letting time, worms, and fungi handle the hard work. It's also sustainable in a way modern gardening often forgets. Every leaf you add back to the soil is a resource saved from burning or landfill. Every patch of humus you build is carbon stored in the ground, water retained for dry spells, and fertility locked in for the future. Your garden can start building humus today with nothing more than leaves. So, here's my encouragement to you: don't overcomplicate it. If you've got a pile of leaves and a tired patch of soil, you've already got everything you need to start. Lay them down, tuck them into a trench, or mix them into your beds. Within months, you'll see the change in soil color, texture, and life. Within years, you'll wonder why you ever struggled with compost piles when the trees were dropping free fertility at your feet all along. And that, my friends, is the ancient leaf trick, simple, powerful, and still as effective today as it was centuries ago. If this guide gave you something useful for your own garden, make sure to subscribe to Soil and Plant Doctor and share this with a fellow gardener. Let's keep these timeless soil building secrets alive, because every handful of humus we build brings us closer to the thriving, living soil our gardens deserve.